My name is Miranda, and I'm 37. I never imagined I'd be treated like a criminal in a house I legally own. The look on Stephanie's face, my brother Logan's new wife, when police told her I was the rightful owner of their home, was almost worth the humiliation almost. I never thought I'd be handcuffed on my own front lawn while my sister-in-law smirked from behind the curtains. Before I dive into this family drama that completely reshaped my relationship with my brother, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. Okay. And if you've ever dealt with entitled family members, hit that like button. Trust me, this tale of family betrayal and sweet justice is one you won't want to miss. So go ahead and subscribe to catch more unbelievable but true family drama stories like mine. Logan and I grew up in a humble Cincinnati neighborhood, just 2 years apart and inseparable as kids. When our parents divorced, I was 12 and Logan 10, and we clung to each other, lifelines in a storm. Our mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and that early financial insecurity impacted us differently. I became determined to achieve financial independence, while Logan developed a complicated relationship with money and status. After college, I dove into real estate investing. Started small, saving every penny from my marketing job to invest in a tiny studio apartment. Through careful research and some lucky timing, I flipped that first property for a modest profit, immediately reinvesting it. By 32, I had a respectable portfolio of investment properties. The house in question, a 4-bedroom Craftsman with a wraparound porch in a desirable suburb, was my 5th acquisition. I vividly recall closing on a TAA major milestone, my first property in the local market's upper tier. I'd worked countless overtime hours and reinvested every profit to afford it. The house needed updates, but it had beautiful bones and was in a rapidly appreciating neighborhood. Around this time, Logan was struggling. He'd been laid off from his pharmaceutical sales job and found it hard to find similar work. His credit had suffered from some poor decisions in his 20s, and at 34 he was living in a dismal apartment with roommates. When I mentioned my new investment property needed a caretaker while I planned renovations, he jumped at the chance. I could help manage the property, keep an eye on things, maybe even do some cosmetic work myself. He suggested over dinner at Mom's. I'm good with my hands. Seemed like a win-win. I could help my brother get back on his feet while ensuring my investment was well maintained. I drafted a formal rental agreement, charging him about 60% of the market rate, which covered my mortgage while giving him a significant discount. My attorney Rachel advised me to keep things professional despite our relationship. Family and business mix about as well as oil and water, Rachel warned. A clear contract protects your relationship as much as it protects your investment. Logan was grateful and enthusiastic. He moved in and, true to his word, took excellent care of the place. He repainted the entire interior, refinished the living rooms, hardwood floors, and beautifully maintained the yard. For 3 years, the arrangement worked perfectly. He got back on his feet professionally, landing a good position with a medical device company, and I had a reliable tenant who treated my property like his own. We had dinner together every Sunday, either at the house or my downtown condo. We'd laugh about childhood memories, discuss our mother's increasingly eccentric hobbies she'd taken up competitive, ballroom dancing at 62, and talk about our future dreams. Logan occasionally mentioned wanting to buy his own home someday, and I was supportive. When you're ready to move on, just give me plenty of notice so I can find new tenants, I told him during one of these dinners. And I'd be happy to help you with the down payment on your own place when the time comes. You're the best, Mira, he said, using my childhood nickname. I don't know what I'd do without you. Those words would echo in my mind repeatedly in the months to come. I continued to invest in other properties, a duplex across town, a vacation rental at a nearby lake. But the Craftsman house held a special place in my heart. It was the property that had elevated my investing from a hobby to serious business. I visited regularly, keeping a detailed inventory of what would eventually need updating. The aging HVAC system, the 20-year-old roof, The original windows that, while charming, were far from energy efficient. Looking back, I should have been clearer with Logan about my long-term plans for the property. I assumed he understood his living there was temporary, a stepping stone for both of us. He seemed content and our relationship was stronger than ever. In fact, those 3 years were some of the best in our adult relationship. Then Stephanie entered the picture and everything changed. Logan met Stephanie Wilson at a medical conference in Chicago, where his company was exhibiting. He called me the day after he returned, sounding more excited than I'd heard him in years. "I met someone, Mira," he said, his voice practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "She's incredible smart, gorgeous, ambitious. She's a pharmaceutical rep for Meridian." Meridian was one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country, but their sales representatives had a reputation for being aggressive and well compensated. I was happy for him, but surprised by his intensity. "That's great. When do I get to meet her?" I asked. "Soon, I hope. We're already planning our next date. She lives in Indianapolis, but she's considering a transfer to Cincinnati." Their relationship progressed at warp speed. Within 3 months, Stephanie had transferred to Cincinnati and was spending most weekends at the house with Logan. By the 6-month mark, Logan called to tell me they were engaged. "Don't you think this is a little fast?" I asked cautiously. "You've only known each other for half a year." "When you know, you know," he replied with an uncharacteristic defensive edge. "We're not getting any younger, Mara." I met Stephanie for the first time at their engagement dinner at Fleming's Steakhouse. She was undeniably beautiful, tall and willowy with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and an expensively cultivated casual elegance. She greeted me with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Logan has told me so much about you," she said, air kissing near my cheek. "It's lovely to finally meet his little sister." I was 37 to her 34, hardly her junior, but I let it slide. Throughout dinner, I noticed how she subtly directed the conversation, cutting Logan off when he started telling stories about our childhood and steering discussions toward their future plans. "We're thinking of renovating the kitchen next," she mentioned casually over dessert. "Those cabinets are so dated, and I've always wanted a 6-burner Viking range." Logan shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, that would be a major renovation," I said carefully. "Have you discussed the budget for something like that?" Stephanie laughed lightly. "Logan tells me you're in real estate. You must know how much value a high-end kitchen adds to a home." The way she emphasized home rather than house struck me as odd, but I dismissed it. Logan had probably just not explained the full situation yet. I changed the subject, asking about their wedding plans. The wedding itself was a lavish affair just 4 months later, orchestrated primarily by Stephanie with minimal input from Logan or their families. I was a bridesmaid, but felt more like a prop than a participant. My mother whispered to me during the reception that she barely recognized her own son's wedding. "It's like we're extras in the Stephanie show," she muttered as we watched Stephanie direct the photographer for what felt like the 100th staged photo. Logan seemed happy, though somewhat dazed by the whirlwind romance and elaborate wedding. I gave them a generous check as a wedding gift, which Stephanie immediately announced would go toward furnishing their home. Within weeks of the wedding, Stephanie had moved into the house and began making dramatic changes. The vintage floor lamp I'd found at an estate sale and lent to Logan disappeared, replaced by a modern monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a high-end catalog. The walls, which Logan and I had painted a warm taupe, were now stark white. Family photos, including several of Logan and Mia's children, had been removed in favor of black and white art prints. When I visited for dinner a month after the wedding, I hardly recognized the place. Even the comfortable sectional sofa had been replaced with a sleek, minimalist piece that looked impressive but felt like sitting on a stone bench. "Wow, you've made some changes," I commented, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Stephanie has amazing taste," Logan said quickly. "She's really transformed the place, Stephanie beamed. We needed a fresh start as a married couple. This house had too much bachelor pad energy. I bit my tongue. The house had been immaculate and tastefully decorated. It's hardly a bachelor pad. But I reminded myself that this was their home now, at least temporarily, and Stephanie deserved to feel comfortable there. As dinner progressed, I noticed more. Concerning changes in Logan, he deferred to Stephanie on nearly every topic, checking her expression before offering his opinion. When I brought up our traditional summer trip to our mother's lake cabin, he glanced at Stephanie before vaguely saying they'd have to check their schedule. Most alarmingly, when I mentioned the property tax increase I'd received notice about Stephanie quickly changed the subject. It seemed increasingly clear that Logan hadn't fully explained our arrangement to his new wife. Over the next few months, Logan became increasingly distant. Our Sunday dinners dwindled to monthly, then bi-monthly occurrences. When we did meet, Stephanie was always present, monitoring our conversations and frequently interrupting with her own stories or concerns. On the rare occasions I visited the house, I noticed more and more changes. My spare key, which I'd always kept for emergencies, and maintenance issues no longer worked. They'd changed the locks without informing me. When I mentioned it, Logan looked embarrassed. Stephanie thought it would be safer, he mumbled. I meant to give you the new key, but the new key never materialized. Then I noticed that the mail addressed to me as the property owner was no longer being forwarded to my condo, as Logan had always done. When I asked about it, Stephanie interjected, "Oh, we've been meaning to talk to you about that," she said with a tight smile. "It's rather confusing having mail come here for you. Perhaps you should change your address officially." I was stunned. "This is my property's legal address," I said carefully. "That mail includes tax documents and insurance information that I need." "Well, it's our home address," Stephanie countered, an edge to her voice. "Oh, it's strange explaining to the mail carrier why someone else's name is on official documents for our house." Logan stared at his plate, saying nothing. In that moment, I realized the depth of the deception. Stephanie fully believed they owned the house, or at least she was pretending to. 6 months into Logan and Stephanie's marriage, I had scheduled a necessary renovation to replace the aging HVAC system. The existing unit was over 15 years old and increasingly inefficient. With summer approaching, I wanted to install a new system before the heat waves hit. I had communicated with Logan about this plan months in advance, and he had agreed to the timeline. I had selected a reputable company, obtained multiple quotes, and scheduled the work for Monday, when both Logan and Stephanie would be at work to minimize disruption. The Friday before the installation, I texted Logan to confirm everything was still on schedule. To my surprise, I received a response not from Logan, but from Stephanie using his phone. "We've decided now isn't a good time for renovations. We'll handle any home improvements ourselves when we're ready. Thanks for your concern, though." I was taken aback by the dismissive tone and the implication that the decision was theirs to make. I called Logan immediately, but the call went to voicemail. Tried again that evening with the same result. Finally, I sent an email to both of them, professionally explaining that this wasn't a cosmetic renovation, but a necessary system replacement that I, as the property owner, had already scheduled and paid a deposit for. Logan finally called me back on Saturday, sounding stressed. "Stephanie thinks we should hold off," he said. "She's concerned about the disruption and mess." "Logan, this isn't optional," I explained patiently. "Current system is on its last legs. It fails in July when it's 90 degrees. Emergency replacements cost twice as much and could take weeks." "I understand, but Stephanie is really adamant about this. Can we talk about it next month? The contractors are coming Monday. I've paid a $2,000 deposit that's non-refundable at this point." There was a long pause, and I heard Stephanie's voice in the background. Logan's tone changed immediately. "We're not available Monday. You'll have to reschedule." He hung up before I could respond. I was floored. In 5 years of owning investment properties, I'd Never encountered a tenant who refused necessary maintenance. The fact that it was my own brother made it even more confounding. The situation deteriorated further when I received a call from the contractor on Monday morning. "Miss Harrison, your tenant's wife refused us entry to the property. Quite adamant that we leave immediately. Is there something we should know about this job?" I was mortified and had to reschedule the work, losing my deposit in the process. When I tried to discuss the incident with Logan, my calls went straight to voicemail. Instead, I received a text from Stephanie. "Please stop harassing us about your renovation ideas for our home. We're not interested in making changes right now. We've made it clear that we'll handle home improvements on our own timeline." The phrase "our home" set off alarm bells. I decided a face-to-face conversation was necessary and invited them to dinner at my favorite restaurant, hoping neutral territory would facilitate a calmer discussion. The dinner was tense from the start. Stephanie arrived wearing an expression of barely concealed annoyance, while Logan seemed uncomfortable and withdrawn. After ordering drinks, I broached the subject carefully. "I wanted to talk about the house and make sure we're all on the same page," I began. "What's there to discuss?" Stephanie asked sharply. "We've told you we're not interested in renovations right now. The issue is a bit more fundamental than that," I said, maintaining my composure. "I'm concerned there might be some confusion about the ownership of the property." Stephanie laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "What confusion? Live there. It's our home." "Yes, you live there as tenants," I clarified. "I own the property. Logan and I have a rental agreement." Stephanie's expression flickered between confusion and anger. She turned to Logan, who was studying his water glass with intense focus. "What is she talking about?" she demanded. Logan cleared his throat. "Mira helped me out when I was going through a rough patch. The arrangement was temporary until I got on my feet." Temporary. Stephanie's voice rose enough that diners at nearby tables glanced our way. "You told me we were building equity in our home. You said we were on track to own it outright." In 12 years, my stomach dropped. Logan had apparently been lying to his wife about our arrangement. I looked at my brother, who couldn't meet my eyes. "Logan, is that true? Did you tell Stephanie you were paying a mortgage rather than rent?" His silence was answer enough. Stephanie's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "So all this time we've been glorified renters, living in your sister's investment property." She spat the words like they tasted bitter. "And when were you planning to mention this little detail, Logan? Before or after I spent $10,000 updating the master bathroom?" I was shocked. "You've been renovating without permission?" "As the owner, I need to approve any structural changes." "Owner," Stephanie repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. "You know what? I think you're jealous. You can't stand that, Logan, and I have made that house into a real home, something your sad little condo will never be." "When we own the place someday?" "That's not going to happen," I interrupted firmly. "I have no intention of selling the property. It's a long-term investment." The look Stephanie gave me was pure venom. Logan finally spoke up, his voice strained. "Steph, I was going to explain everything. I just needed to find the right time." "The right time was before we got married," she hissed, gathering her purse. "I can't believe this. I've been telling my parents, my friends, everyone about our beautiful home. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" She stormed out, leaving Logan and me in uncomfortable silence. He looked utterly defeated. "I'm sorry, Mara. I messed up. She comes from money. Her family has this huge house in Indian Hill. I was embarrassed to tell her I was renting from my little sister. I was hurt but tried to understand. Logan, I would never judge you for that. But this situation has gotten out of hand. Stephanie clearly believes you own the house, and she's making decisions about my property without any right to do so." "I'll talk to her," he promised, though he didn't sound convinced of his own ability to handle the situation. "Just give me some time to smooth things over." Over the next 2 weeks, I heard nothing from Logan. I discovered through a neighbor that Stephanie had been telling people in the neighborhood that they owned the house and were considering joining the homeowners association. She had even criticized my choice of exterior paint color to several neighbors, promising they would be repainting soon. When I called the HVAC company to reschedule the installation, I was informed that a Mrs. Harrison had permanently canceled the service. Stephanie had apparently represented herself using my last name, a disturbing development that bordered on identity fraud. The final straw came when I drove by the property and saw construction debris in the driveway. From what I could see, they had begun the bathroom renovations Stephanie had mentioned without my knowledge or consent. I decided it was time to assert my rights as the property owner. I would need to inspect the unauthorized renovations and ensure they weren't damaging my investment. With a growing sense of unease, I scheduled contractors to meet me at the house the following morning. I arrived at the house at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, accompanied by Mark, my regular contractor, and his assistant. Both Logan and Stephanie's cars were gone, which I had expected. They should have been at work. I had texted Logan the night before, informing him I would be inspecting the property with contractors, but received no response. I'm concerned about what we might find. I told Mark as we approached the front door. They've apparently been doing unauthorized renovations. Not unusual with tenants, Mark said sympathetically. Though family situations can get extra complicated. I tried my original key first, confirming my suspicion that the locks had been changed when it didn't work. Sigh. I retrieved the spare key from the lockbox. I had installed years ago on a side gate, a box that Logan knew about, but Stephanie likely didn't. We entered through the back door, and I called out as we stepped into the kitchen. "Hello, Logan." "Stephanie." There was no response, confirming the house was empty. My jaw dropped as we walked through the main floor. The changes were far more extensive than I had realized. The kitchen had been partially demolished, with cabinet doors removed and countertops ripped out. The hardwood floors in the living room that Logan had so carefully refinished were now covered with trendy gray laminate. "This is worse than I thought," I murmured, taking photos to document everything. We headed upstairs to check the bathroom, where the damage was even more significant. The vintage clawfoot tub I had lovingly restored had been removed entirely. Tiles were stacked against the wall, and the sink fixtures had been ripped out, leaving exposed pipes. "These renovations aren't being done to code," Mark pointed out, examining the plumbing work. "And they've cut corners on the waterproofing in the shower area. This could lead to serious water damage." I was taking more photos when I heard the back door slam. Seconds later, Stephanie appeared in the bathroom doorway, her face contorted with fury. "What the hell are you doing in our house?" she demanded. "Stephanie, I texted Logan yesterday that I would be inspecting the property today," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. "I don't care what you texted. You can't just barge in here. This is breaking and entering. Actually, as the property owner, I have the legal right to inspect with reasonable notice," which I provided. I explained, maintaining my composure despite her hostility. "Property owner?" Stephanie scoffed. "You're delusional. This is our house. Logan and I have been paying the mortgage for years." Mark and his assistant exchanged uncomfortable glances. I sighed deeply. "Stephanie, there is no mortgage at least not one that you and Logan are paying. I own this house outright. Logan pays me rent at a family discount rate. He's been lying to you if he's claimed otherwise." "You're the liar," she shouted, her face flushing. "Logan would never deceive me about something this important. Get out before I call the police." "Stephanie, I have all the documentation out," she screamed, pointing toward the stairs. "All of you, get out of my house right now." Mark looked at me uncertainly. I nodded that we should comply to de-escalate the situation. As we descended the stairs, Stephanie followed, her phone already in hand. "Yes, I need to report intruders in my home," she was saying to the 911 operator. "My sister-in-law and 2 men broke in and are refusing to leave. Stephanie, this is a huge mistake." I warned her. I have not broken in. I have legal access to my own property. She ignored me, giving the operator the address and describing us as hostile intruders. I was stunned by the blatant misrepresentation. "We'll wait outside," I told Mark. "This is clearly a misunderstanding that needs to be resolved." As we stepped onto the front lawn, Stephanie locked the door behind us and continued to watch through the window, still on the phone. 10 minutes later, 2 police cars pulled up, lights flashing but sirens off. "That's them," Stephanie told the officers as they approached, pointing at us from the porch. "They broke in while I was out getting coffee. God knows what. They were planning to steal." The older officer, whose nameplate read Garcia, addressed me. "Ma'am, we received a call about unauthorized entry to this residence. Can I see some identification, please?" I provided my driver's license. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding. My name is Miranda Harrison. I am the legal owner of this property. My brother and his wife are tenants." "She's lying," Stephanie interjected. "This is our house. We've been paying the mortgage for years." Officer Garcia looked between us. "Do you have proof of ownership, Miss Harrison?" "Not on me, but I can access the deed and property tax records online," I offered, pulling out my phone. While I was searching for the documents, a third car pulled up. Logan had apparently been called as well. He rushed over, looking panicked. "What's going on?" Steph called and said. "Miranda broke. Your wife called the police on me for inspecting my own property after I gave you notice yesterday," I said, my calm facade finally cracking with hurt and anger. Logan's face fell. "Mira, I'm so sorry. I forgot to tell Stephanie you were coming. Tell her I was coming." "Logan, she thinks you own this house. She thinks you've been paying a mortgage, not rent." Stephanie had moved to Logan's side, clutching his arm. "Tell her, Logan. Tell your sister she has no right to break into our home with strange men." The confusion on the officers' faces was evident. The younger officer, Reynolds, stepped forward. "Sir, can you clarify the ownership situation of this property?" Logan's face drained of color as he looked between his wife and me. Moments stretched painfully until finally he spoke. "Miranda owns the house," he admitted quietly. "I rent from her." I haven't been completely honest about that, Steph." Stephanie's expression morphed from righteous indignation to shocked betrayal. "What are you saying?" "I never took out a mortgage," Logan continued, his voice hollow. "The payments we've been making go to Miranda as rent. She's owned the house for 5 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Officer Garcia cleared his throat. "Miss Harrison, do you want to press charges for the false report?" "What?" "No," I said immediately. "This is a family misunderstanding. I just want access to inspect the unauthorized renovations being done to my property." Officer Garcia nodded. "In that case, we'll need to see documentation of ownership before we leave." I pulled up the property deed on the county records website and showed it to the officers. They verified my identification against the name on the deed, then turned to Logan and Stephanie. "Miss Wilson, it appears Miss Harrison is indeed the legal owner of this property. False reporting is a serious offense. You're fortunate your sister-in-law doesn't wish to pursue charges." Stephanie's face had gone from red to ghostly white. She turned to Logan with such hurt and anger in her eyes that even I felt a twinge of sympathy. "How could you lie about something like this?" she whispered. Then louder, "How could you let me believe we own this place? I've spent thousands on renovations. Told everyone this is our home." Logan reached for her, but she backed away. "Steph, please, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That our entire marriage is built on a lie. That we're just pathetic renters living on your sister's charity." Miss Wilson, Officer Reynolds interjected gently. "Perhaps this conversation should continue privately. We've established that Ms. Harrison has the legal right to be here." Stephanie ignored him, grabbing her purse from inside the door. "I can't even look at you right now, Logan. I'm going to my parents." She pushed past us all and stormed to her car, speeding off with a squeal of tires. Logan stood on the lawn, looking utterly devastated, while Mark and his assistant awkwardly examined their clipboards, trying to appear invisible. The officers took final statements and prepared to leave. Officer Garcia pulled me aside. "Family disputes over property can get ugly fast," he advised quietly. "I'd recommend documenting everything and considering a more formal tenant agreement moving forward." After the police left, Logan and I stood in uncomfortable silence on the lawn. "I'm so sorry, Mira," he finally said, his voice breaking. "I never thought it would go this far. I couldn't tell her the truth." "Why, Logan? Why would you lie about something so fundamental?" He ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "You don't understand what it's like being with someone like Stephanie. Her family has everything: money, status, success. Success. I felt like such a failure in comparison. When she assumed the house was mine, I just went with it. The brother I knew was somewhere inside this man who had deceived his wife and disrespected my property. But at that moment, it was hard to see him. "We need to talk about the renovations," I said, keeping my tone businesslike to hold my emotions in check. "Mark says some of the work isn't up to code and could cause serious damage." Logan nodded miserably. "Can we go inside? I'll show you everything." I can't tell you how surreal it felt walking through my own property with my brother, cataloging the unauthorized changes his wife had made based on a lie he had perpetuated. The beautiful house I had invested in was half demolished, caught in renovation limbo. Much like my relationship with Logan was now in emotional limbo. The day that started with a police confrontation would mark the beginning of the most challenging period in our sibling relationship, and it was only going to get more complicated from here. I know many of you have experienced betrayal from those closest to you. If you're finding this story relatable or shocking so far, give this video a like and keep watching to see how this family drama unfolds. Trust me, the revelation's coming. Next changed everything I thought I knew about my brother and his wife. The day after the police incident, I sat in my condo feeling emotionally drained. My phone had been buzzing with texts from Logan throughout the night. Apologies, explanations, pleas to talk. But I wasn't ready to respond. Instead, I called my closest friend, Rebecca, who had known both Logan and me since college. "He did what?" Rebecca exclaimed after I recounted the story. "I can't believe Logan would lie about something so significant. That's not like him at all." "That's what I keep thinking," I admitted, curling up on my couch with a glass of wine. "The brother I know is honest to a fault. Remember when he returned that extra $20 the cashier gave him by mistake, even though he was broke that month?" "Exactly." "This behavior seems completely out of character. There has to be more to the story." Rebecca's words stuck with me. Despite my hurt and anger, I couldn't reconcile the Logan I knew with the man who had deceived his wife and disrespected my property. Something wasn't adding up. By the third day, I finally responded to Logan's texts, agreeing to meet him at a coffee shop downtown Neutral Territory, where we could talk without the emotionally charged atmosphere of the house. Logan arrived looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. He ordered a black coffee and sat across from me, hands wrapped around the mug as if seeking warmth despite the summer heat. "Thank you for meeting me," he began, his voice rough. "I don't even know where to start." "The beginning would be good," I suggested, keeping my tone even. "When exactly did you decide to lie to Stephanie about owning my house?" He winced. "It wasn't a deliberate decision at first. When we started dating, I mentioned living in the Oakwood neighborhood, and she assumed I owned the place. I was going to correct her, but then she talked about how her ex-husband had never been able to commit to buying a home, how stability was so important to her. So you just went with it." I told myself it was too early in the relationship to get into my financial history, that I'd explain everything once we got serious. He stared into his coffee. But the longer I waited, the harder it became to tell the truth. By the time we were engaged, the lie was so established that coming clean seemed impossible. But Logan, you involved my property in your deception. Stephanie has been making unauthorized changes to my house, canceling necessary maintenance, acting like she owns the place because you told her she did. I know, he said miserably. It spiraled out of control. Every time I thought about telling her, I imagined losing her. You've seen how she is. Appearances mean everything to her. Something in his phrasing caught my attention. Is that why you married her? For appearances? Logan looked startled, then deflated. No, yes. I don't know anymore. You have to understand, Mira. Stephanie comes from serious money. Her father is a surgeon. Her mother comes from old Cincinnati wealth. Their house in Indian Hill makes our childhood home look like a shack. So when she showed interest in me, it was intoxicating. Someone from her world choosing me. It's gorgeous, connected, the kind of woman I never thought would look twice at me. When she believed I was successful enough to own that house, I saw how she looked at me with respect. I couldn't bear to lose that. I softened slightly, recognizing the insecurity behind his actions. But building a relationship on a lie, especially about something so significant. How did you think that would work long term? I kept telling myself I'd fix it somehow, he admitted. I thought maybe I could save enough for a down payment on another house. Then tell her I wanted to sell our house and buy something that was truly ours. Or that I'd get a huge promotion and could offer to buy the house from you for real. Those scenarios weren't realistic, Logan. The house is worth over $500,000 now. He nodded miserably. I wasn't thinking clearly. And then once we were married, Stephanie started talking about renovations, about putting our stamp on the place. Before I knew it, she was hiring contractors, choosing fixtures. Wait, I interrupted, a new concern forming. How are you paying for these renovations? Please tell me you haven't taken out loans using my property as collateral. Logan's silence sent a chill through me. Logan, what did you do? Not a home equity loan, he said quickly. I couldn't do that without the deed. But I did take out a personal loan to cover the renovations, and our credit cards are maxed out. How much debt are we talking about? About $40,000, including the loan and credit cards. I nearly choked on my coffee. $40,000. Logan, that's more than you make in half a year. How are you planning to pay that back? Ran his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration I recognized from childhood. Stephanie assured me her bonus this quarter would cover a big chunk of it. But now, with everything that's happened, I'm not planning to help with the debt from renovations to a house she now knows isn't hers. I finished for him. She's barely speaking to me, Logan confirmed. She's been staying at her parents' house since the incident. Her father called me yesterday and, let's just say, he had some choice words about my character. Despite my anger, I felt a twinge of sympathy for my brother. He had dug himself into an impossibly deep hole. There's something else you should know, he added reluctantly. The rent payments. I haven't been making them in full for the past 3 months. What, Logan? That's my mortgage payment. I know. I'm sorry. The renovation costs spiraled, and Stephanie kept insisting on higher-end fixtures than we'd budgeted for. I was going to catch up once her bonus came through. I sat back, trying to process everything. My brother had lied too. His wife accumulated massive debt, made unauthorized changes to my property, and now wasn't even paying the below-market rent we'd agreed upon. I need to understand something, I said after a long moment. You've been telling Stephanie you're paying a mortgage. Where did she think those payments were going? Logan looked even more uncomfortable. I set up a separate bank account. I told her it was automatically withdrawing the mortgage payment each month. In reality, I was transferring what I could to you when I had it. So, you've been deceiving her financially from the beginning of your marriage? It wasn't a question. It sounds terrible when you put it that way, he said weakly. Because it is terrible, Logan. Marriage is supposed to be built on trust and honesty. The irony of giving relationship advice to my older brother wasn't lost on me. But the situation had moved beyond sibling dynamics. This was now about legal and financial obligations. I should have come clean from the start, he acknowledged. I was embarrassed, Mara. You're my little sister. And you own multiple properties while I couldn't even qualify for a mortgage on my own. Do you know what that feels like? I never judged you for that, I said softly. I helped because I love you and I was in a position to do so. There's no shame in accepting help from family. Easy to say when you're the successful one, he muttered. The comment stung, but I recognized it came from a place of hurt and humiliation. Still, I needed to protect my interests. I'm going to need to consult with my attorney about the unauthorized renovations, I told him. And we need to work out a repayment plan for the back rent. Logan nodded, looking defeated. I understand. I'll do whatever you need. I don't want to lose my marriage and my sister in the same week. After our coffee meeting, I called my attorney, Nora Sanders, who specialized in real estate law. She agreed to meet me the next day to discuss the situation. Your brother's deception puts you in a difficult position, Nora advised after I explained everything. The unauthorized renovations could affect your property value and insurance. More concerning is the potential for Stephanie to claim partial ownership based on her financial contributions to renovations, even though they were made under false pretenses. Could she really do that, even though I have the deed and a rental agreement with Logan? It's complicated, Nora explained. While the law is on your side regarding ownership, there's potential for a messy legal battle if she wanted to pursue it. She could claim she made improvements to the property with the understanding that she was a co-owner and seek compensation for those improvements. But that understanding was based on Logan's lie, not anything I did. I protested. True. But family court can sometimes make decisions based on perceived fairness rather than strict property law. My advice would be to document everything thoroughly and consider having a formal meeting with both Logan and Stephanie to clarify the situation and reach an agreement everyone can live with. Following Nora's advice, I spent the next day gathering documentation, the original deed, property tax records, the rental agreement with Logan, and photographs of the unauthorized renovations. I also ran a property record search to ensure no liens or claims had been filed against the house. What I discovered shocked me even further. Stephanie had indeed applied for a home equity line of credit using the property address, though it had been denied due to the mismatch with property records. If the application had somehow been approved, it could have created a legal nightmare. I texted Logan about my discovery. Did you know Stephanie tried to take out a home equity loan on my house? His response came quickly. No, I swear. Mira, I had no idea. We never discussed anything like that. Either Logan was lying again, or Stephanie had taken financial actions without his knowledge. Neither scenario was reassuring. I was beginning to realize that the problems in their marriage went far deeper than just the house ownership deception. With Nora's guidance, I prepared for a formal meeting with both Logan and Stephanie to address the property issues and establish clear boundaries moving forward. The foundation of trust had been severely damaged, but I was determined to find a solution that protected my investment while giving my brother a chance to make things right. What I didn't know then was that Stephanie had secrets of her own revelations that would turn this already complicated situation into something none of us could have anticipated. 3 days after my meeting with Nora, I had assembled all the necessary documentation: property deed, tax records, rental agreement, insurance policies, and photographs of the unauthorized renovations. I asked Nora to arrange a meeting at her office, hoping the formal setting would underscore the seriousness of the situation. Logan agreed immediately. Stephanie, however, initially refused to attend. She says there's nothing to discuss with you, Logan told me over the phone, sounding exhausted. She's still staying at her parents' and barely speaking. To me, this isn't optional, Logan. I insisted. We need to resolve the property issues regardless of what's happening in your marriage. The renovations are half completed, code violations need to be addressed, and we need a clear plan moving forward. I'll try again, he promised. Her father is an attorney, though not in real estate. Maybe if he understands the legal implications, he'll encourage her to attend. Whatever Logan said must have worked, because Stephanie eventually agreed to the meeting, though she would be bringing her father's colleague, a lawyer named Daniel Wright, as her representative. The atmosphere in Nora's conference room that Friday afternoon was glacial. Stephanie sat ramrod straight in her chair, designer sunglasses perched on her head, her expression carefully neutral. Her attorney, a silver-haired man in an impeccable suit, sat beside her, reviewing documents. Logan occupied the chair farthest from Stephanie, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Nora and I sat across from them with printouts of documents organized in neat folders. "Thank you all for coming," Nora began professionally. "We're here to clarify the ownership situation of the property at 487 Oakwood Avenue and establish a plan for addressing the unauthorized renovations." Daniel Wright cleared his throat. "Before we proceed, my client would like it on record that she entered into these renovations with the good faith understanding that she and her husband were the rightful owners of the property. That understanding was based on deliberate misrepresentation by Mr. Harrison," Nora countered. Smoothly, not any action or statement by Miss Harrison, the legal owner. I opened the property deed folder and slid copies across the table. "This is the deed showing I purchased the property 5 years ago. I've also included property tax statements for the past 5 years, all in my name, and the original rental agreement signed by Logan." Stephanie didn't touch the documents, but her attorney reviewed them carefully. "These appear to be in order," he acknowledged reluctantly. "However, my client has invested significant personal funds in property improvements based on fraudulent information provided by her husband. We believe she is entitled to compensation for those improvements. The improvements were made without the property owner's knowledge or consent," Nora pointed out. "In fact, some of the work has created code violations that Miss Harrison will now have to remedy at her own expense." I decided it was time to speak directly to Stephanie, who had yet to make eye contact with me. "Stephanie, I understand you feel deceived. And you have every right to be angry with Logan. But these renovations were done without my permission, and some of them have actually damaged the property." "Don't talk to me about deception." Stephanie finally spoke, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "You were complicit in this charade. You visited Artha House multiple times and never once clarified that you owned it. I had no idea Logan hadn't told you the truth." I responded, genuinely surprised by her accusation. "I assumed you knew the arrangement. Why would I specifically mention something I thought was already established? Convenient," she said coldly. Logan, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. "Steph, Miranda didn't know. This is entirely my fault. I lied to you, not her." Stephanie turned to him, her carefully composed facade cracking. "You have no idea what you've done? You know how many times I've talked about our beautiful home to my parents, to my friends, to my boss? I brought my entire family over for Christmas dinner, and what turns out to be essentially a rental property. It's a very nice house," Logan offered weakly. "That's not the point." Stephanie's voice rose. "My family has owned property for generations. Homeownership is a baseline expectation. When I told my father we were renovating our first home together, he was finally starting to respect you. Now he knows the truth that you've been lying to me and living on your sister's charity." The naked class prejudice in her statement hung in the air. I felt a surge of protective anger toward Logan despite his deception. "There's no shame in renting," I said firmly. "And the arrangement wasn't charity. Logan pays market appropriate. Renton has been an excellent caretaker of the property, at least until recently," Stephanie scoffed. "Of course you'd say that. The Harrisons stick together, don't they? Even when one of you is a pathological liar?" "That's enough, Stephanie," Logan said with more backbone than I'd heard from him in months. You can be angry with me. I deserve it, but don't attack Miranda. She's innocent in this. Stephanie's attorney intervened smoothly. Let's focus on the legal and financial aspects. My client contributed approximately $20,000 of her personal funds toward home improvements under the belief that she was a co-owner. We believe she should be compensated for those contributions. Nora shook her head. Those improvements were made without the owner's consent, potentially reducing the property's value rather than enhancing it. Miss Harrison could reasonably seek damages rather than owing compensation. As the attorneys continued their back and forth, I watched Logan and Stephanie. There was more happening here than just a property dispute. The foundation of their marriage had been built on a significant lie, and the cracks were now impossible to ignore. May I make a suggestion? I interjected, interrupting the legal sparring. I understand Stephanie feels wronged financially. I'm willing to consider reimbursing reasonable expenses for improvements that actually add value to the property, provided I receive all receipts and documentation. It's caught everyone's attention. Stephanie looked at me suspiciously. Why would you do that? Because despite everything, Logan is my brother, and I want to find a solution that allows everyone to move forward, I said honestly. But I need to know the full financial picture first. Logan shifted, uncomfortably. There's something else you both should know, he said quietly. The renovation costs. They're not just from Stephanie's money. I took out a personal loan for $30,000. Stephanie whipped around to face him. What? We agreed we would use my bonus and savings. When did you take out a loan? When the costs kept increasing, Logan explained, not meeting her eyes. The Viking range you insisted on was $9,000 alone. The Italian marble for the bathroom was another. $8,000. Our original budget was completely blown within the first month. So, you went behind my back and took out a loan? Stephanie demanded. Like you went behind my back and applied for a home equity line of credit on a house you now know isn't ours. Logan countered. Stephanie's face paled. She glanced at her attorney, who looked equally surprised. That was a preliminary inquiry, she stammered. I was exploring options for the additional renovations we discussed for the kitchen extension. A preliminary inquiry that would have constituted fraud if it had been approved, Nora pointed out sternly. The meeting was rapidly devolving. Years of pent-up insecurities, deceptions, and miscommunications were spilling out in my attorney's tasteful conference room. Let me be absolutely clear, I said, taking control of the conversation. I am the legal owner of the property. No renovations or changes can be made without my explicit written consent. Logan has been in violation of our rental agreement by allowing unauthorized modifications, and both of you have created a legally problematic situation. I turned to Stephanie. I understand you feel deceived, and you have every right to be angry with Logan. But attempting to take out loans against property you don't own crosses a line from marital disagreement into potential fraud. Then, to Logan, and you violated my trust by lying about the ownership situation and allowing significant unauthorized changes to my property. The rent shortfall and the potential damage from improperly done renovations are serious issues that need to be addressed. Both looked appropriately chastened, though Stephanie quickly recovered. This is ridiculous, she said, gathering her purse. I didn't come here to be lectured about a situation I was deceived into. Daniel, we're leaving. Stephanie, wait. Logan pleaded. We need to resolve this. There's nothing to resolve, she snapped. You deliberately misled me about something fundamental from the beginning of our relationship. You let me believe we were building equity when we were just paying rent to your sister. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? I was trying to impress you, Logan admitted, his voice breaking. You talked so much about your ex not being ambitious enough, about wanting security and stability. I was afraid you wouldn't be interested in me if you knew the truth. Well, you were right about that, Stephanie said coldly. I would never have married a man who couldn't even qualify for a mortgage on his own. The brutal honesty of her statement seemed to shock even her attorney, who winced visibly. "Miss Wilson," Nora interjected, "regardless of your marital issues, we still need to address the property situation. The half-completed renovations present safety and code compliance issues that must be resolved." Stephanie stood, smoothing her expensive blouse. "That's Logan's problem now. I've moved out and I've already spoken with a divorce attorney. Daniel is here to protect my interests regarding the funds I've already invested. Nothing more. Divorce." Logan looked stricken. "Steph, please, we can work through this." "There's nothing to work through. You deliberately misled me about our financial situation." "My father was right about you all along." "Your father?" Logan repeated. "What does he have to do with this?" Stephanie hesitated, then lifted her chin defiantly. "He said, you weren't good enough for me from the beginning, that a sales rep from a second tier medical device company would never provide the lifestyle I was accustomed to. I defended you. I told him you were different, that you were ambitious, that we owned a beautiful home in Oakwood that you'd bought before we even met. So that's what this is really about." Logan asked quietly. "My income, my status, not who I am as a person." "Don't try to take the moral high ground," Stephanie scoffed. "You lied to me for our entire relationship." "You're not a victim here." "I never said I was," Logan replied. "What I did was wrong. But I did it because I loved you and was afraid of losing you." "You were ready to leave the moment you found out the truth about our financial situation. What does that say about your feelings for me?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Stephanie gathered her things and walked out, her attorney trailing behind after promising to be in touch regarding the financial claims. Logan sat motionless, staring at the door long after it closed. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were wet, but clearer than I'd seen them in months. "I'm so sorry, Mira," he said simply, "for everything. The meeting hadn't gone as planned, but it had revealed the truth, not just about the property, but about Logan and Stephanie's relationship. Built on deception from one side and materialism from the other, it had been destined for failure from the beginning." As we left Nora's office, I put my arm around my brother's shoulders, feeling the weight of his mistakes, but also the bond that had connected us since childhood. "We'll figure this out," I promised him, one step at a time. Didn't know then exactly how we would resolve the property issues or heal the wounds this situation had created. But I did know that, unlike Stephanie, I wasn't going anywhere. Family might sometimes disappoint you, but true family stays to work through the mess, however complicated it might be. If you've ever had to rebuild trust with a family member after a major betrayal, you know it doesn't happen overnight. Hit that like button if you're invested in finding out how Logan and I navigated this complicated situation and how Stephanie's role in this family drama ultimately played out. The final part of this story has some unexpected twists you won't want to miss. 3 months passed in a blur of legal consultations, contractor visits, and emotional conversations. The half-completed renovations in the house had indeed caused some structural issues that required immediate attention. Water damage from the improperly waterproofed shower had begun to affect the ceiling below, and the electrical work in the kitchen had been done without permits, creating potential safety hazards. I hired Mark and his team to correct the problems. It's costing me nearly $15,000 that I wasn't sure I would ever recoup. Logan moved out of the house and into a modest one-bedroom apartment closer to his workplace, insisting that he couldn't continue living in the space that had become a symbol of his deception. "It doesn't feel right anymore," he told me as we packed up his personal belongings. "Every time I walk through that door, I remember the lies and how it all fell apart." True to her word, Stephanie filed for divorce almost immediately. Logan didn't contest it, though he was fighting her claims to his 401k and other assets. She maintained that she had been defrauded and deserved compensation for the lost equity in a home she had never actually owned. Logan and I were slowly rebuilding our relationship. He had begun paying back the overdue rent in small installments and had shown genuine remorse for involving my property in his deception. We had resumed our Sunday dinners, though now they were usually takeout in his small apartment rather than home-cooked meals in the house. I've started seeing a therapist. He mentioned one Sunday as we ate Thai food straight from the containers. She's helping me understand why I felt the need to lie about my financial situation, why I was so insecure about my worth. "That's great, Logan," I said sincerely. "I think it will help." "It already has," he admitted. Realized how much of my self-worth was tied to external validation, especially from people like Stephanie and her family, who measure success in material terms. It was a level of self-awareness I hadn't seen from my brother in years. Despite the painful circumstances, it seemed the collapse of his marriage was forcing him to confront some long-standing issues. I had listed the house with a real estate agent, deciding that selling it was the cleanest way to resolve the situation. The property had appreciated significantly, and even after the costs of fixing the botched renovations, I stood to make a healthy profit. Emotional complications had simply become too great for me to want to maintain it as a rental property. "Are you sure you want to sell?" Logan had asked when I told him my decision. "I know how much that house means to you as an investment. Sometimes the smartest investment move is knowing when to let go," I replied. "Besides, there are other properties. The memories attached to this one have become too complicated." We were slowly finding our footing again as siblings, though the ease and closeness we'd once shared remained somewhat elusive. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. Then came the unexpected call from Stephanie. "Miranda, it's Stephanie. I was hoping we could meet. There are some things I need to say to you in person." Surprised and somewhat wary, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown, the same one where Logan and I had had our heart-to-heart months earlier. Stephanie looked different than I remembered. The polished, perfectly put-together woman had been replaced by someone more subdued. Her designer clothes had given way to simple jeans and a sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, rather than expertly styled. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would. I was curious," I admitted. "Our last conversation wasn't exactly friendly." She winced slightly. "That's part of why I wanted to talk to you. I owe you an apology." Of all the things I had expected her to say, an apology wasn't on the list. I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. "I was awful to you at that meeting," she said, looking genuinely remorseful. "I was hurt and humiliated, and I lashed out." "You didn't deserve that. You weren't the one who lied to me." "I appreciate that," I said cautiously, "but I'm confused about why you're telling me this now. Aren't you and Logan still in the middle of divorce proceedings?" Stephanie sighed, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. "Yes, technically, but things have evolved. After the initial shock and anger wore off, I've had a lot of time to reflect on my role in what happened." "Your role? Logan lied about the house?" "Yes, that was wrong. Questionably. But I've had to ask myself why he felt he needed to." She looked up at me, her expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. "The truth is, I gave him every reason to believe I wouldn't be interested in him if he didn't project a certain image of success." The admission seemed to cost her something. Could see the struggle playing out on her face, the desire to defend herself warring with newfound self-awareness. "My family, they're very focused on appearances," she continued, growing up. The measure of success was always tangible. The right address, the right schools, the right car. I internalized that without even realizing it. When I met Logan, he was different from the men I usually dated. He was genuine, kind, funny, but he didn't have the trappings of success my family valued. So when he let you believe he owned the house, it fit the narrative I wanted. It made it easier to bring him home to my parents. I never questioned it because I didn't want to. Her honesty was unexpected but refreshing. Have you told Logan any of this? We've started talking again, she said, a hint of hopefulness in her voice. Really talking, not just about the divorce. My therapist suggested we try a few joint sessions to get closure, but they've turned into something more meaningful. That's surprising, I said honestly. For me too. Stephanie admitted with a small laugh. I was so angry at first, but the more distance I got, the more I realized how unfair my expectations had been. Logan felt he had to lie about his financial situation because on some level he knew the truth mattered to me in ways it shouldn't have. She took a sip of her coffee, then continued. Don't get me wrong, the lying was still a betrayal. Trust has been broken, but I'm starting to understand it in a different context. So, what happens now? I asked. With the divorce, with the house situation? That's partly why I wanted to talk to you, Stephanie said. I've dropped the financial claims related to the house renovations. My attorney advised against it, but it's the right thing to do. I made those improvements believing something that wasn't true. But that wasn't your fault. Thank you, I said, genuinely relieved. That's very fair of you. Fair is the least I can be at this point, she replied. I've also been thinking about the house itself. I heard from Logan that you're selling it. I nodded. It seemed like the cleanest resolution. It's too many complicated emotions attached to it now. That makes sense, she acknowledged. But before you finalize anything, Logan and I have been discussing a possibility. It's just an idea at this stage. But what if we bought it from you for real this time? I nearly choked on my coffee. You and Logan together. I thought you were divorcing. We've paused the proceedings, she explained. I'm not saying we're definitely reconciling, but we're exploring the possibility. This whole situation forced both of us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our relationship. We're doing the work now that we should have done before getting married. And buying the house is part of that work. I asked skeptically. In a way, it would be a fresh start, one built on honesty this time. Logan would be a true Coner, not living a lie. And I would be choosing to build a life with him, knowing exactly what our financial situation is. She hesitated. Obviously, we'd need a mortgage, which would require Logan rebuilding his credit. It might take time, but if you're willing to consider an owner-finance sale or a lease-to-own arrangement. The proposal was unexpected, to say the least. My initial instinct was to refuse, to complete the clean break I'd been planning. But something about Stephanie's sincerity gave me pause. I'll think about it, I promised, not committing further. It would depend on a lot of factors, including how serious you and Logan are about rebuilding your relationship. She nodded, understanding my reservations. That's fair. We're still figuring that out ourselves. But I wanted you to know that I am truly sorry for how I behaved and for the things I said about you and Logan. As we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of closure beginning to form. The hurt and betrayal hadn't disappeared, but they had begun to transform into something more nuanced, recognition that human relationships are complicated, and that people are capable of both terrible mistakes and genuine growth. In the end, I decided to sell the house on the open market rather than to Logan and Stephanie. Their reconciliation was still too tentative, their foundation still being rebuilt. Introducing a major financial entanglement seemed unwise for all parties. The house sold quickly to a young family with 2 children who loved the neighborhood and the schools. Watching them tour the property, excited about their future there, I felt a weight lifting. The house would become a home again, free from the complications that had tainted it for me. I used part of the proceeds to help Logan pay off the personal loan he had taken out for the renovations, with a clear repayment agreement and timeline. This time, with everything documented properly and transparently. You didn't have to do this, Logan said when I presented the plan. After everything that happened, you'd have every right to let me figure it out on my own. That's what family does, Logan, I told him. We help each other when we can, but we do it honestly, with clear boundaries. Logan and Stephanie continued their counseling, taking their reconciliation slowly and deliberately. Whether their marriage would ultimately survive remained uncertain. But they were approaching their issues with a level of honesty and self-awareness that had been missing before. As for me, I purchased a new investment property, a small apartment building in an up-and-coming neighborhood. The day I closed on it, I held a small celebration and invited Logan. As we toasted with champagne on the empty rooftop, watching the sunset over the city, he asked me a question that had clearly been on his mind. After everything that happened, aren't you afraid to trust me with this new property? I wouldn't blame you if you kept me completely separate from your business from now on. I considered his question carefully. Trust isn't an all-or-nothing proposition, Logan. I trust you as my brother, as someone who made a serious mistake but is working to make amends. I trust that you've learned from this experience, but I've also learned to establish clearer boundaries and expectations. He nodded, understanding. I'm still sorry, for dragging you into my mess. No, I said simply, but I'm proud of how you're handling the aftermath. That counts for something. The property drama had changed our relationship permanently. There was no going back to the easy, unquestioning trust we'd once shared. But perhaps what was emerging was something more mature, more grounded in reality rather than idealized notions of family loyalty. The house that had become the centerpiece of so much conflict was no longer ours, but the lessons it taught us about honesty, boundaries, and forgiveness would remain. Sometimes losing a house means finding what home and family really means. Looking back at this whole experience with my brother and his wife, I've learned that family relationships can survive even the deepest betrayals, but only with honesty and genuine effort from all sides. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real family stories. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with a family member after a significant betrayal? Share your experiences in the comments below. All right, everyone, and would love to hear how you navigated your own family challenges. Thank you so much for following along with my story. And remember that sometimes the most painful family situations can lead to unexpected growth and healing if we're brave enough to face them honestly. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that family reconciliation is possible even after the most difficult betrayals.